The first real snow of winter came quietly to Harvest Hollow. So quietly, in fact, that most of the valley didn't notice it until late morning, when pale sunlight touched the rooftops and revealed a world entirely transformed. Overnight, every wooden fence post had grown a cap of white velvet. Every pine branch sagged gently under glittering frost, and every stone path wore thin, icy lacework like it had dressed for a winter ball. Liora stood at the window of her grandmother's old cottage, watching the slow drifting flakes settle over the garden. The world seemed to breathe differently after snowfall, slower, softer, deeper, like winter itself was tucking everything in for a long, thoughtful sleep. The cottage smelled faintly of pine logs, lavender, and something older, something warm. Her grandmother, Liora. Though she had passed only 3 months earlier, Liora still felt her presence woven into every corner of the house, in the creak of the wooden beams, in the soft hum of the old kettle warming over the stove, in the neat rows of jars filled with herbs and dried flowers, in the cupboards lined with candles of all shapes and sizes. Liora had been known for her candles, not ordinary ones, though she made those too. Liora crafted memory candles, as the villagers liked to call them, candles for grief, candles for hope, candles for guiding lost hearts home again. People whispered that she could listen to wax, that she could shape light into meaning. Liora never fully understood the whispers, but she knew her grandmother's candles brought comfort. And comfort in Harvest Hollow was something dearly needed, because the valley had changed. Harvest Hollow used to be golden, literally. Glimmering autumn light rippled over fields full of barley and wheat. The harvest festival was the brightest night of the year, and families roasted chestnuts beneath lanterns that swayed on long wooden posts. But over the past decade, winters had grown longer. Frost crept earlier into the fields each year. Crops thinned. The last great harvest had taken place before Liora was even born. Now the valley seemed to live in a state of gentle dimness. Not dark, not hopeless, but muted, like a lantern whose wick had grown too short. Liora pressed her fingers to the window pane. The cold seeped into her skin. "The hollow feels tired," she whispered to herself, and she felt it too. Not sadness, not exactly. Just a sense that something was missing. She pulled her shawl tighter and turned toward the stairs leading up to the attic. Today she had promised herself she would finally begin sorting through her grandmother's old things properly. The attic held all of Ilara's candle-making tools, along with trunks of letters, baskets of ribbon, and boxes labeled with handwritten notes like "Winter Charms for the Lonesome Days," "Lantern Ribbons, Festival Only," "Stories Waiting for Light." That last label always gave Liora a strange, fluttering feeling in her chest. She climbed the narrow wooden staircase, each step sighing softly, as though remembering the countless times Liora had walked them before her. The attic door groaned open. Dust stirred in the cold air, illuminated by a single slice of winter sunlight. The attic looked like a miniature wonderland. Bundles of dried herbs hung from ceiling beams. Rows of candles lined the shelves, spiral candles, floating candles, candles shaped like pine cones, and candles carved with moons and stars. Wooden crates overflowed with old festival lanterns painted in warm oranges and deep reds. And everywhere, on every shelf, in every corner, there were tiny glass jars containing fragments of the valley's past. Ribbons from harvest dances, pressed leaves, broken lantern handles, seeds from the last golden wheat crop. Liora smiled softly. Her grandmother had kept everything. Near the back of the attic, beneath a quilt embroidered with swirling stars, sat a wooden chest that Liora had always avoided opening. Not because she feared it, more because she sensed that whatever lay inside was meant to be opened only when she felt truly ready. Today, she felt that readiness gently tugging at her heart. She kneeled and brushed the dust from the lid. The wood was carved with familiar patterns, falling leaves, curling tendrils of vines, and at the very center, a single tiny flame, a candle flame, her grandmother's symbol. With a deep breath, Liora lifted the lid. Inside lay notebooks filled with her grandmother's looping handwriting, sketches of candles, diagrams about wick braiding techniques, recipes for wax infused with winter herbs, and notes titled things like Light That Listens, Flames That Remember, Harvest Hollow's Heart. But one object stood out immediately, a single sealed envelope, tied with twine and stamped with a deep red. Her grandmother's familiar handwriting flowed across the page. My dearest Liora, if your hands are holding this letter, then my light has passed into yours. Do not be afraid. Light never leaves us. It only changes form. Liora's breath caught. There is a candle in Harvest Hollow older than my grandmother and her grandmother before her. A candle born from gratitude, from remembrance, from the valley itself. It sleeps where the first frost settles each winter, hiding until a keeper awakens it. A tear slid down Liora's cheek as she read, "You are that keeper now. If you feel a tug, soft but certain, follow it. The hollow dims not because winter grows, but because hearts forget what warmed them. Find the candle, bring back our light, and remember my sweet girl. Not all lights are meant to banish darkness. Some exist simply so we know we are not alone. With all the love this valley ever gave me," Grandmother Ilara Liora closed her eyes, holding the letter to her chest. The attic felt warmer suddenly, as though wrapped around her with a memory she didn't realize she needed. When she opened her eyes, she knew her life had changed. The tug was there, gentle, like a thread of warmth, pulling from deep within her chest. She did not know where the first frost touched the earth. She did not know how to awaken a candle of memory. She did not know what being a keeper meant. But she knew she had to try. She folded the letter carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of her shawl, and whispered, "I'll find it, grandmother. Whatever it is." The attic seemed to hold its breath. Then quietly, from somewhere far below, the wind rose outside, lifting snowflakes into a small, swirling dance, almost as if the valley itself had heard her promise. Chapter 2. The Man Who Walked the Frost Line. The next morning dawned in soft shades of pearl and silver. The sky, still heavy with unfallen snow, pressed low over Harvest Hollow, wrapping the valley in a hush so complete that even the birds seemed to sing more quietly, as though reluctant to disturb the morning's fragile calm. Liora stepped outside with her grandmother's letter tucked safely inside her shawl, the paper warm from resting close to her heart. The cold air kissed her cheeks, crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and distant chimney smoke. Snow crunched gently beneath her boots, each step leaving an imprint that seemed to glow faintly before fading into the pale blanket of white. She didn't know exactly where she was going, but she knew where she felt pulled, and the tug, that soft, steady tug, drew her toward the old harvest fields. Harvest Hollow had changed over the years, but the fields still bore the remnants of their golden past. If one looked closely, one could still see the faint lines where rows of barley once grew, and the old irrigation stones now sat moss-covered beneath layers of frost. The river that wound around the fields glittered beneath a thin layer of ice, as though wearing a necklace of frozen stars. Liora followed the river's edge, her breath fogging in little clouds. As she walked, the valley slowly woke around her. Mrs. Fenwick opened her bakery shutters. Children pulled sleds through the snow. A farmer brushed frost from his weathered cart. Each villager she passed greeted her kindly, yet each smile carried something else, something quiet and weary. The valley had not held a true harvest celebration in years, and the absence of that tradition had left a hollow space in everyone's heart. A space a candle was meant to fill. Liora paused at the edge of the fields. The frost here felt different, brighter somehow, like sunlight trapped in tiny frozen prisms. The tug in her chest grew stronger. She stepped onto the frost-blanketed earth. Every footstep seemed to echo a memory she couldn't quite place. Laughter carried on wind, lanterns swaying on tall poles, music that once drifted through warm autumn nights. She wasn't old enough to have been part of those golden days, but somehow she felt them stirring in the quiet beneath the snow. As she walked deeper into the field, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, Liora thought it was simply a farmer clearing snow, but as the figure drew closer, she realized he moved with unusual grace, steady, deliberate, purposeful, each step falling gently upon the frost without disturbing it much at all. He was tall, wrapped in a heavy ash-grey cloak with frost clinging to its edges like embroidery. His beard was silver-threaded, his boots lined with old leather, and in his hand he held a wooden staff topped with a small lantern, unlit yet glowing faintly from within. Liora froze. The man lifted his head, and for a moment their eyes met, his the color of winter smoke, soft and kind, carrying a depth that made the snow-washed world around them feel suddenly still. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and warm despite the cold. "You walk with purpose for someone so young." Liora swallowed. I think I'm looking for something." He smiled gently. "Most who come to these grounds are looking for something. The difference lies in why." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Do you know this place well?" "Better than most," the man replied. "I've walked these fields since the barley was tall enough to hide a grown man." His eyes softened. "And I knew your grandmother." Liora's breath caught. You knew Ilara?" "Knew her," he said, bowing his head slightly, "and respected her greatly. She understood the old ways most have forgotten." Liora's heart beat faster. The letter, the tug, the candle. "Do you know about the candle of Harvest Hollow?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Something flickered in his eyes, like recognition or relief. "I do," he said quietly, "but I also know its path is not mine to guide." He gestured to the frost-covered ground. "The candle will not show itself to those who seek it out of duty, or fear, or even curiosity. It reveals itself to a heart that remembers warmth, even if it does not understand why." Liora blinked. "I don't know what I remember. I just feel pulled." "That is enough." He stepped back and pointed with his staff toward a patch of frost that shimmered brighter than the rest, so bright it looked almost silver. "Walk there," he said softly. "Do not look for a candle. Look for what feels familiar. Familiar. Liora swallowed her fear and walked toward the shimmering frost. The moment her boot touched the edge of the patch, the frost flared gently, glowing in little ripples that spread outward like rings on water. A warmth, subtle, almost shy, rose from the ground, brushing against her ankles. Liora's breath trembled. She knelt and brushed the frost aside. Underneath lay an old stone circle, carved with symbols she recognized from her grandmother's journals. Tiny flames, spirals, and curling leaves. And in the very center rested a small wooden box, edges worn smooth by time, its lid carved with a single flame. Her heart pounded. This was it. She knew it. With trembling fingers, she lifted the box. Snowflakes melted instantly upon its surface as though warmth radiated from within. She opened it. Inside lay a candle, small, teardrop-shaped, creamy golden, its wick braided with a silver thread. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Liora gasped softly. It looked simple, humble, barely more than a decorative trinket. Yet it held a presence so gentle and ancient that the air itself seemed to bow around it. The man stepped closer, though his boots made almost no sound in the snow. "You have found it," he said quietly. Liora closed the box gently, unable to stop the soft smile forming on her lips. "How did you know it was here?" "The first frost always reveals what the valley still remembers," he said, "and it remembered you." He shifted his staff. The lantern at its tip glowed faintly. "My name is Aldarian," he said, bowing slightly, "and I believe your grandmother hoped you would take up her light." Liora hugged the wooden box to her chest, feeling its gentle warmth seep through her shawl. "What do I do now?" she whispered. Aldarian smiled with ancient gentleness. "Now," he said, "you learn why the valley grows dim, and what a single candle can do when held by a heart willing to carry it." Behind them, the snow swirled in a quiet dance, and for a moment, Liora felt as though the valley itself exhaled. Light had returned. Just a little, but enough. Chapter 3: The Candle That Breathes. Light, Liora walked home with the wooden box held close to her chest, as though the candle inside might slip away if she loosened her grip even slightly. Snowflakes brushed her face like soft whispers, melting the moment they touched her skin. A hush had fallen over the valley, deeper than before. Yet it wasn't heavy. It felt expectant, like the pause before the first note of a long-forgotten song. Aldarian did not follow her. He remained in the fields, standing tall and unmoving, watching the frost shimmer under the pale sun. For a moment, she looked back, wondering if she should say more. Thank him, ask him to come with her, ask who he really was. But something told her he would find her again when the moment was right. So she walked on. The village lay down the sloping path, huddled in warm pockets of smoke and lantern light. Chimneys breathed soft plumes into the sky. The blacksmith's shop rang with quiet hammering. Children tossed handfuls of snow toward one another, their laughter floating weakly in the cold air. But beneath the laughter, Liora sensed it again. That tired dimness, like a candle burned too low. She clutched the box tighter. When she reached her grandmother's cottage, she shut the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing in the familiar scent of pine logs and winter herbs. The cottage felt still, as though waiting for her next move. She placed the box gently on the wooden table. The faint glow from within the box seeped through its lid, illuminating the carved flame like a tiny heartbeat pulsing through wood. Liora hesitated before opening it again, afraid somehow that the moment she lifted the lid, the candle would vanish, or crumble, or reveal that this had all been a dream. But her grandmother had never written frivolous things. Her words always glowed with truth. So with a steady breath, Liora lifted the lid. The candle sat exactly as before, small, golden, its silver-threaded wick lying soft and ready. But now, in the dim light of the cottage, its glow looked different. Warmer, almost awake. Liora brushed the surface of the candle gently with her fingertip. A warmth spread up her hand. Not heat, not fire, but a tender warmth like resting in front of a hearth after a long winter night. A warmth that reached not her skin, but something deeper. Something she had never known how to name. Her breath trembled. "What are you?" she whispered. The candle answered only with a soft pulse of light. Liora stepped back, her heart fluttering, not fearfully, but in awe. She reached for a match from her grandmother's old brass tin, but before she lit it, she paused. Her grandmother's letter had said nothing about how to light the candle, only that it slept, only that it waited. Could a candle like this be lit with an ordinary match? Her hand wavered. Then she remembered Aldarian's words. It reveals itself to a heart that remembers warmth, even if it does not understand why. Warmth. She closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother telling stories beside the fire, of warm blankets on stormy nights, of lantern festivals she had only seen in old sketches, of villagers sharing soup and bread on the coldest days, of laughter in years when the valley still glowed. Her heartbeat softened, her breath steadied, and when she opened her eyes, she knew what to do. She struck the match. The small flame sprang to life, tiny but determined. Liora held it above the silver wick, expecting the candle to accept the flame instantly. Instead, the wick glowed on its own, faintly at first, then brighter, until the flame from the match flickered, leaned toward the candle, and merged with it. There was no sound, no spark, no sudden burst, just a single, soft inhalation of light, as though the candle had taken a gentle breath. Then the glow rose. Not flame, something softer, rounder, almost cloud-like. A shimmering mist of warm gold swirled above the wick, illuminating the room with slow-moving patterns like drifting memories. Liora lowered the match, stunned, as the glow began to shift. Within its soft radiance, images formed, blurry, then clear. Liora saw a younger version of her grandmother standing in this very cottage, lighting a candle much like this one. The room filled with warm laughter from villagers gathered around her. Faces Liora didn't recognize, yet felt she somehow should. People holding hands, sharing stories, tears of joy, tears of healing. The golden glow twisted gently, showing her grandmother kneeling before Liora as a toddler, cupping her hands around a tiny handmade candle. This light, Ilara whispered at the memory, is not just a light. It is the warmth we give each other. The glow shifted again. Liora now saw the village, lanterns swaying from post to post, children with painted cheeks running through fields of tall wheat. A wide harvest table filled with steaming bread and roasted vegetables. Elderly villagers dancing slowly, laughing softly, their faces radiant with gratitude, scenes of joy, scenes of love, scenes of a valley bright with spirit. The candle pulsed again, and a new image formed, the valley under frost, houses dim, people walking with slow, weary steps. The absence of light not from winter, but from forgotten warmth. The glow softened, then slowly faded. The cottage returned to quiet. Liora found tears running down her cheeks. The candle had shown her the hollow's heart, not its history, not exactly, but the warmth it used to hold, and the warmth it had lost. Liora sank into a chair, overwhelmed by a gentle, aching tenderness. "So that's why I'm supposed to find you," she whispered. "Not to bring magic to the valley, but to remind it what it already had." She looked at the candle. It pulsed once, faint, steady, like a nod. Liora brushed her thumb over the wooden box. "What happens next?" she asked softly. There was no voice, no sound. But the tug in her chest returned, stronger now, like a whispered answer. "Share the light." A knock sounded on the cottage door. Liora startled, wiping her eyes quickly. She opened the door to find Mrs. Fenwick, the baker, cradling a basket of warm bread, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "Liora, dear, are you all right?" she asked softly. "I felt something, like warmth through the cold, coming from your cottage." Her eyes drifted past Liora's shoulder, and her breath caught. "What is that light?" Liora stepped aside, her heart racing, because she realized the candle wasn't meant only for her. The valley needed it too. Chapter 4. When a village remembers its glow. Mrs. Fenwick stepped into the cottage as though crossing the threshold of a dream. The soft golden mist still hovered above the candle's wick, swirling slowly like warm breath on a cold window pane. She pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes filling with something between surprise and longing. "Oh," she whispered, "I haven't felt warmth like this since, her voice trembled, since before the last great harvest." Liora watched her gently, feeling the candle's presence pulse at her side like an attentive heartbeat. "Would you like to sit?" she asked softly. Mrs. Fenwick nodded, lowering herself into a chair near the table as though unsure whether her legs would hold her. Her gaze was fixed on the candle, not fearful, not shocked, but reverent, as if seeing a friend she had forgotten she missed. "This light," she murmured. "It reminds me of something old, something I thought I'd lost." She blinked rapidly, her breath hitching. "Is it truly?" "A candle of memory," Liora finished gently. "The one the village used to light during the last night of harvest." Mrs. Fenwick covered her mouth with both hands. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, catching the candle's soft glow like tiny pearls. "Your grandmother kept the tradition alive for so many years," she whispered. "Even when the fields grew tired, even when the valley darkened. And now it's you." Liora looked down at the candle, its gentle warmth reaching her in waves. She didn't feel worthy, not yet, but she felt the tug again, that quiet insistence in her chest. "Mrs. Fenwick," she said softly, "the candle showed me things. Memories of the harvest days, the village when it was bright." Mrs. Fenwick nodded slowly. "We all remember pieces, but the memories feel foggy now, like looking at sunlight through frost." Liora hesitated. "Would you like to see it? Like I did?" Mrs. Fenwick inhaled sharply. Is that possible?" Liora wasn't entirely sure, but she sensed the candle listening, waiting, willing. She gestured for Mrs. Fenwick to come closer. "Just place your hand near it," Liora whispered. "Not too close, just enough for it to sense your warmth." Mrs. Fenwick reached out with trembling fingers. Her hand hovered above the candle, hesitant but hopeful. The wick pulsed. The golden mist rose again, gently like a sigh, and wrapped itself around her fingers in soft tendrils of light. Mrs. Fenwick gasped, not in fear, but with the wonder of someone remembering a melody they hadn't heard in decades. The mist swirled. Images shimmered inside the glow, forming like memories written on warm fog. Mrs. Fenwick saw herself as a younger woman, her hair dark and her smile bright, kneading dough beside her husband. Their bakery, once bustling, scented with honey and spice, was filled with laughter. Villagers came in and out, trading stories as easily as they traded coins. The glow deepened. She saw the harvest festival of her youth, lanterns bobbing in the night air like drifting stars, children dancing through the fields, music weaving through the wind. She saw herself handing out warm sweetbread to anyone who passed by. Her husband beside her, their hands brushing as they worked. And then she saw the last time she had danced with him, slowly, in the middle of a lantern-lit field, snow beginning to fall, both of them laughing softly at the unexpected flurry. She felt his hands again. She felt the warmth of his coat. She felt the love they shared. The glow dimmed slowly, like the closing of a gentle eyelid. Mrs. Fenwick lowered her hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she was smiling, truly smiling, warmth radiating from her as though she herself had become a lantern. "Oh, Liora," she whispered, "thank you." Liora felt her own eyes sting. "It's the candle, not me." "No," Mrs. Fenwick said firmly, placing her warm hand over Liora's. "You brought it back. That makes you part of its light." A knock sounded at the door. Liora startled, wiping her eyes quickly. When she opened the door, she found 3 villagers standing outside. Mr. Alder, the blacksmith's wife, and little Jonas with his wooden wolf still clutched in his mittened hands. "Liora," Mr. Alder said gently, "we felt something." The blacksmith's wife nodded. "A warmth, a comfort, like a memory trying to reach us." Jonas looked up with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can we see it?" Liora glanced behind her at the glowing candle. She felt the tug again, stronger this time. The candle's purpose wasn't to be hidden. It wasn't just hers. It never had been. She stepped aside, opening the door wide. "Yes," she whispered. "Come in." The cottage filled slowly with villagers, each one drawn by the warmth like moths to a gentle flame, but with reverence, not desperation. Some hesitated at the threshold, unsure whether they deserved the candle's light. Others stepped in bravely, desperate to remember brighter days. Liora guided them one by one. The blacksmith's wife saw the memory of her newborn daughter, wrapped in a knitted blanket the village had made together during the last harvest celebration. She wept softly, clutching the vision to her heart. Mr. Alder saw himself as a young man carving birds from wood beside his father. He stared at his hands with wonder, as though rediscovering their strength. Little Jonas, barely old enough to understand loss, saw a woman with kind eyes kneeling beside him, someone he recognized without remembering. His mother. He smiled as though warmed from within. Villager after villager stepped forward, each touched by a different glow, each receiving something the valley had quietly needed for years. Liora watched them all with a growing mixture of awe and tenderness. This wasn't magic, not truly. This was memory, warmth, connection, light returning to a place that had forgotten its own glow. And the candle, the humble, pulsing candle, was simply helping them remember. But as the last villager stepped back, eyes shining, hands clasped around their heart, Liora felt something unexpected beneath the warmth, a soft shiver. The candle pulsed again, just once, but deeper, like a heartbeat preparing for something greater. Alderian's words rung in her memory. Its path is not yours to guide forever. The candle must awaken, then rest. But first, it must reveal what the valley truly needs. Liora looked at the candle, golden light breathing softly in the dim cottage. Something was changing, something was coming, and the candle knew it long before she did. Chapter 5: The Longest Night's Calling. The days that followed felt as though the valley itself had begun to thaw, not in temperature, but in spirit. Snow still fell thick and soft over rooftops. Frost still painted windows in delicate lace. But the people of Harvest Hollow walked differently. Lighter, straighter, warmer. And everywhere Liora went, fetching water from the well, buying flour from the market, delivering herbs to Mrs. Fenwick, she saw small signs that the candle's light had taken root. The blacksmith hummed old harvest songs as he hammered steel. Mrs. Fenwick lit lanterns outside her bakery at dusk, each one glowing a warm amber. Children built snow lanterns and lined them along the path leading to the fields. Even the river seemed to shimmer more brightly under the pale sun. But the greatest change of all was the way the villagers looked at each other now. Not past one another, not through one another, but toward one another. As if remembering that they all shared the same long winter, the same old stories, the same quiet hope. And at the center of it all was the candle. Liora kept it safe in the wooden box her grandmother once used to store precious things. During the day, it rested quietly on the table or the mantel, its glow faint, like a warm ember waiting for a touch of wind. At night it pulsed gently, casting a soft halo across the cottage walls as if dreaming. But every so often, especially at dusk, its light flickered strangely, almost urgently. Liora felt it like a whisper against her heart. Not yet. Wait, soon. She didn't understand, but she sensed the candle did. One late afternoon, 3 days before the longest night, Liora stepped outside to fetch firewood. The air tasted sharper than usual. The sky had deepened into a dusky blue, though the sun had only just begun its descent. A wind blew across the fields, a thin, cold wind that carried no scent of pine or hearth smoke. It carried nothing. She frowned, hugging her shawl tighter. The valley was never completely silent. Even in the deepest winter, there were owls, or wind chimes, or the rustle of branches. But today the air felt hollow, as if the valley were holding its breath again, but not in anticipation this time, in warning. Liora, she turned. Alderian stood at the path's edge, his ash-grey cloak rustling faintly, frost clinging to its edges like silver lace. His staff glowed softly, the lantern atop it pulsing the same warm gold as the candle inside her cottage. She hadn't seen him since the day in the frost-lit fields, but he looked unchanged, calm, steady, eyes filled with a knowing gentleness. "Alderian," Liora breathed, "I've been hoping you'd return. The candle, there's something happening with it. Something I don't understand." "I know," he said quietly. "That is why I'm here." He walked toward her with slow, careful steps, leaving only the faintest marks in the snow. Liora felt a tightness form in her chest. "The candle is calling," she whispered. "Isn't it?" Alderian nodded. "The longest night approaches," he said, "and with it, the moment when light must return to where it began." Liora's pulse quickened. "Return? You mean the candle has to go back to the harvest fields?" "Yes," Alderian said, voice gentle as falling snow. "If the candle remains only in one place, its light will fade. It was never meant to belong to one person, nor even one home. It was meant to be shared, awakened, then returned to rest until the valley needs it again. Liora's throat tightened. "But if we return it," she whispered, "will the light disappear?" Alderian shook his head. "No, it will return to sleep. But its warmth, what has already been rekindled, will remain in the hearts it touched." He paused, his breath forming soft clouds in the cold dusk. "The candle awakens the memories we forget. It reminds us of who we were, and who we still can be. But it cannot be carried forever. Its cycle is older than any of us." Liora bit her lip. She knew he was right, yet the thought of parting with the candle felt like losing her grandmother all over again. "My grandmother carried it," she murmured. "How did she say goodbye to it?" Alderian's eyes softened with deep sadness. "She didn't have to," he said softly. "The valley wasn't ready to sleep then. It held enough warmth in its people to keep the candle awake for many years. But as time passed, the valley dimmed. Traditions faded, the fields grew cold, and so the candle slept." Liora's heart ached. "But now," she whispered. "Now," Alderian said gently, "the valley breathes again. Thanks to you." Liora shook her head. "Thanks to the candle." "And to the heart that carried it." Alderian lifted his staff slightly, letting the lantern cast a warm halo over the snow. "On the longest night," he said, "just before midnight, you must bring the candle to the stone circle where you found it. Place it in the frost. The valley will do the rest." Liora nodded slowly, feeling courage gather like soft feathers inside her. "I'll do it," she said, "if that's what the valley needs." Alderian smiled, the faintest curve of lips. "Light returns to those who carry it willingly." He turned to go, but paused, eyes drifting toward her cottage. "There is one more thing," he said. Liora frowned. "What is it?" "Before the candle sleeps again," Alderian said softly, "it will show you something meant only for you, something you need to carry forward." Liora felt her breath catch. What? What will it be? But Alderian only shook his head. Only the candle knows. And with that, he walked into the deepening dusk, vanishing into the falling snow, as though swallowed by winter itself. That night, the candle glowed brighter than ever. It pulsed like a heartbeat. It shimmered like a firefly caught in dreams. It cast soft wave after soft wave of warmth across the cottage walls. Liora sat before it, watching, listening, waiting. "What do you want to show me?" she whispered. The candle flickered. A glow gathered, and before her eyes, something began to form. Slowly, gently, a memory so deep it felt like touching the roots of the valley itself. A memory she did not expect. A memory she did not know she needed. A memory of her grandmother, standing in the frost, holding the candle, whispering words Liora could almost hear. The glow brightened, and then softly the vision began. Chapter 6. When the light sleeps and the heart remembers. The memory rose slowly, like a lantern lifted from the depths of still water. Liora watched, breath held, as the candle's glow shaped itself into a soft, living picture. Her grandmother standing in a field of frost on a night-long past. Snow drifted in spirals around her cloak, and her hands cupped the little golden candle, as though sheltering a delicate bird. Ilara looked younger than Liora had ever known her, hair less silver, posture straighter, face bright with hope. In the vision, she knelt beside the old stone circle and whispered into the cold air, "Light travels farther than we do." Then she placed the candle on the frost, bowed her head, and stood with quiet pride as its glow spread through the valley, like morning light through mist. The vision softened, dimmed, and faded. Liora blinked, tears blurring her sight. "Grandmother," she breathed. The candle pulsed once, warm, gentle, as if acknowledging her grief and her love all at once. Then its glow went still. The longest night had arrived. The valley gathered long before midnight. Harvest Hollow did not host many celebrations anymore, but tonight the villagers felt a stirring, an instinct older than any festival. Lanterns hung from doorways. Snow lanterns lined every path like glowing cairns. Families wrapped in shawls and scarves walked toward the old harvest fields, their footsteps muffled by thick snow. Liora stepped out of her cottage last. She wore her grandmother's winter cloak, a deep forest green trimmed with soft fur, and carried the wooden box in both hands. Inside it, the candle pulsed faintly, warming the wood from within. An entire village awaited her. Mrs. Fenwick held a basket of steaming bread. Mr. Alder stood with his son. Jonas clutched his wooden wolf. Even the quietest villagers, the ones who rarely left their homes, stood among the lantern light, their breath clouding gently in the cold. Alderian waited at the edge of the path. He bowed his head as she approached. "Are you ready, Liora?" She tightened her grip on the box, heart swelling with something tender and certain. "Yes." Together they walked toward the fields. The harvest grounds glimmered beneath the moon, every inch covered in frost, so bright it looked like a lake of stars. The old stone circle shone faintly beneath the snow, symbols glowing silver as though waking from a long dream. The villagers formed a wide ring around it, silent with reverence. Liora stepped forward alone. The wind stopped. Even the snowflakes seemed to pause mid-fall. With slow, careful hands, she opened the wooden box. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd as the candle's light touched the air. Warm, steady, alive. Liora knelt, just as her grandmother had, just as countless keepers had before her. She placed the candle in the center of the stone circle. The silver-threaded wick flared with a gentle glow. No flame, just light, and then the world seemed to inhale. The candle pulsed, once, twice, 3 times, and then the light grew. Not blinding, not harsh, but deep, warm gold, spreading across the snow like melted sunlight. It flowed outward in soft waves, touching one villager after another, washing over boots and lanterns and shawls, filling the valley with a warmth that was not heat, but memory. People closed their eyes. Some smiled, some cried, some laughed softly as memories returned to them, memories they thought winter had stolen forever. Liora felt it too. She saw her grandmother holding her as a child, saw warm harvest nights she had never truly lived but somehow remembered, saw the valley glowing not just in the past, but in the future, a valley not restored by magic, but by hearts choosing to warm one another. The candle's glow shifted upward, rising gently like a golden breath released into the night sky. Then, slowly, softly, it dimmed. Its light folded inward, pulsing one last time before settling into a quiet, sleeping glow. The candle had returned to rest. And yet, the valley did not feel dimmer. If anything, it felt brighter, because the glow now lived in the villagers' eyes, in their stories, in the way they reached for each other's hands in the cold. Alderian stepped beside Liora. "It is done," he whispered. "You have given the valley back its heart." Liora looked at the candle, small, humble, resting now within the frost like a tiny sun fallen into sleep. "And what about me?" she asked softly. "What happens now?" Alderian smiled, a warm, knowing smile that held winters and summers and stories beyond counting. "You become what your grandmother was," he said, "a keeper of lights, not because you carry the candle, but because you carry what it awakened." Liora felt the truth settle over her shoulders like a gentle cloak. She did not need the candle's flame to guide her anymore. She had its warmth in her heart. When the villagers returned home, they brought with them more than lanterns. They brought memories, and gratitude, and warmth they promised to keep alive. Families baked together again. Children sang. Neighbors shared food and stories. The valley, once weary, began to glow with a subtle, steady brightness that neither frost nor long winters could dim. Liora walked home last. At the cottage door, she turned back once more to look at the sleeping fields, the stone circle, the candle's faint resting glow. A soft wind brushed her cheek, warm despite the cold. She smiled. "Good night," she whispered. "I'll keep your light safe." And with that, she stepped inside, the warmth of a whole valley following her. The candle of Harvest Hollow slept, but the light it awakened would shine for generations.